Hello, everyone. Welcome to Slash Film Daily. Today is Wednesday, October 16th, 2024. On today's episode of the show, we're going to gather around the virtual water cooler and talk about what we've been watching. My name is Ben Pearson. I am an editor at slashfilm.com. I'm joined on today's episode by Slash Film editor and chief film critic, Chris Evangelista.
Hello.
Chris, how's it going? What have you been watching recently?
I just saw Smile 2 and I reviewed it for slashfilm.com. The review went up today.
Excellent. I'm going to add that review to our show notes so people can read that there, but tell me what you thought about it.
I liked it. I liked the first movie. I went through an interesting thing where when I first saw the original movie, I didn't really like it that much because it felt really derivative. Like it just felt like it was borrowing ideas from like a million other movies. And then I rewatched it on Blu-ray, and I actually grew to really like it on Blu-ray. Like giving it a second chance, like seeing it with new eyes, I sort of came to really appreciate it. So I was looking forward to this. I think this is pretty much on par with the first movie, maybe a little bit better. It's doing very similar things to the first movie, just doing them on a bigger scale. Naomi Scott stars in this. She plays a pop star who is cursed with the smile. I don't know if you want to call it like a smile virus, whatever you want to call it. It's sort of
Yeah.
like it's like a disease sort of thing. And she's really good at this. Like I've seen her in other things. I saw her in the terrible live action Aladdin and the Charlie's Angels movies that I feel like everyone forgot about, and that the Power Rangers movie, which is better than I think it deserves to be. Like I thought that was like a pretty good movie for what it was,
Hmm.
but this is like the best I've seen her be like so far. I don't think she was like bad in those other movies, but this is the first time I was like, oh, she's like a really good actor, and I want to see more of her. She does like a really good job of like just going through hell. Is like she just tormented like every single scene in this movie. But I dug it overall. If you saw the first movie and liked it, you'll like this movie. I think.
Okay, so I was kind of on the fence about the first movie because the thing that I didn't like or didn't love, I guess, about that first film was that it was very much about capital T trauma, which is like, one of these things that has kind of infected the horror genre specifically, but kind of movies overall in the past, I don't know, let's call it 10 years or something. It seems like there's been a lot of stories where people's trauma is unpacked and uncovered, and all of that is well and good, but there seems to be this thing in horror, and this is, I'm somebody who does not devote nearly as much of my time in this genre as you do, so please tell me if I'm wrong about this, but I get the sense that there is this streak of trauma centric horror things that people kind of eventually roll their eyes at a little bit. So I'm wondering how Smile 2 treats that topic, or if it even broaches it at all.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. There is definitely a trend in horror that's cropped up in the last like 5 or maybe even longer years, where they really lean into like the horror is actually a metaphor for trauma. And as with everything, there are good versions of this and there are bad versions of this. I feel like in the right hands, it can be done well, but it can also be like a lazy crutch if you're not like good at your job. And there is that in this movie. The Naomi Scott's character, we find out at the beginning. This isn't like a spoiler. Like they tell you this right at the beginning of the movie, where a year ago she was in a car accident and her boyfriend who was driving the car died, and since then she's gotten like she was like really into drugs at the time. She's gotten like clean and sober, so she's still like sort of haunted by that. But what I found interesting is that this movie would almost make a really interesting sort of double feature with The Substance, because both of those movies are about famous women who are grappling with like a form of like self-loathing, and uh I just thought that was like an interesting comparison, because like I feel like that's the thing a lot of people are missing about The Substance. The Substance deep down is really about, like, yes, it's about beauty standards of women and stuff like that, but it's also really a movie about like self-loathing. It's a movie about a woman who really does not like herself, like,
Mhm.
and granted, like, that's due to outside influences, but that's really what that movie's about, and that's sort of what this movie is about too, where Naomi Scott's character is just like filled with this like self-hatred, both because of like the accident and just like she's like got it in her head that like no, she's like a lonely person, like even though she's like a famous pop star, the movie sort of like underlines the fact that like even when you're like rich and famous, you can still feel like empty. Like that rich and fame is not going to like fill something inside of you as much as you want it to be. So
Mm.
it's definitely there, but it's handled, I think, in an interesting way at least.
Excellent. Okay, so Smile 2 comes out in theaters this, I guess, Thursday night, Friday, and we're probably not going to talk about it very much in terms of like an in-depth spoiler conversation or anything. So I'm glad that we were able to talk about it today, especially since you liked it. So again, I'll encourage people to click on Chris's review to get a deeper dive in his thoughts about that film. What else have you been watching, Chris?
So I got to see Brady Corbett's The Brutalist, which is a film that's played at a few. It's not out yet. It comes out in December. It's played at a few film festivals. I was really lucky to get almost like a private screening of this, where I went to see it at 9 o'clock in the morning. There were only two other people in the theater. If you're ever in that opportunity, I recommend it. It's like the best way to watch a movie. So this movie, it's got a lot of buzz already, both for being really good and for its length. It is a 3 hour and 35-minute movie,
Whoa.
which I told my girlfriend that, and she was like, "Oh my god, I will never watch that." Like, it's just like some people just can't like handle that. And I completely understand that. And sometimes I like long movies when they're done really well. Uh, Roger Ebert has a famous quote where he said, I'm paraphrasing, but he basically said, like, no good movie is long enough and no bad movie is short enough, basically, is what he said. So if you handle your material well and you handle the pacing well, a long movie can be great. And, I don't want to talk too much about the length because I feel like that's like the least interesting thing about the movie, but this is like the fastest almost 4 hour movie I've ever seen. Like
Wow.
I never once felt the length. I was so engrossed and wrapped up in the movie. There is an intermission. So if you need to go to the bathroom, you'll I think it's like a 15-minute intermission. There's like actually a countdown on the screen, which I thought was interesting. It's like intermission, and this is how much time is left. But I was so wrapped up in this and so engrossed in it, and it's just a really excellent film. It's definitely like one of the best things I've seen this year. I like Brady Corbett's other films. He directed The Childhood of a Leader, which is a movie I don't think a lot of people have seen, but I thought was really good. And he also directed Vox Lux, which I thought got a little more attention, which is also okay, but I don't like it as much as Shadow of the Leader. But this is the best thing he's ever done. This is sort of like to give you an idea of like what kind of movie this is. It feels like sort of like The Godfather and like There Will Be Blood, that sort of movie where it's like this epic American story, and it's very much rooted in like the 20th century and how the 20th century was this sort of like shifting point in history and how things changed in such a drastic way. Well, like World War II and the aftermath of that, and the immigrant experience, and it's just a fascinating film. Adrian Brody is really good in this. Adrian Brody is a good actor. I feel like he's had a very weird career where he won the Oscar for the Pianist, and then he sort of like went out of his way to make non-Oscar movies. Like he followed it up with like a Predator movie and stuff like that. So it's like he's a very strange actor, but he's phenomenal in this. He plays an architect who escapes a concentration camp and he comes to America. He was an architect in Budapest, but here in America he has to work his way up, and he gets a job in a furniture shop, and he's hired to build a library for this rich guy played by Guy Pearce. And the Guy Pearce's character is so impressed with the bookshelves he builds, which are very like modernist and unconventional, that he hires him to build this gigantic structure on his property. And the movie starts off, I think it starts off in the 40s, maybe the 30s. I can't remember off the top of my head, but it goes all the way until the 1980s. And it spans like all these decades, and it follows this story. And it's just, like I said, I was so just taken with this movie, just sitting there in this mostly empty theater watching it. And like, honestly, if it had been like even an hour longer, I would have not have mind. Like I kind of just did not want it to end. I was so in love with this movie. It's
Wow.
just so good.
Okay, so that's called The Brutalist. Definitely put that on your radar. It's been on my radar for a little while now. I am so eager to see this, but I probably won't be able to see it until I don't know, maybe yeah, December or something when it finally comes out. But I'm sure we're going to be talking about this one more because the buzz around it is that like this is one of the best movies of the year. So I'm sure we're going to be having more conversations about The Brutalist in the months to come. Let's see, what else have you been watching, Chris?
I got to see Woman of the Hour, which hits Netflix this week. It hits Netflix on Friday, and this is Anna Kendrick's directorial debut, and she's also in the movie. And this is it's based on a true story, but they fictionalize it a little bit. But in the 1970s, uh, there was a serial killer named Rodney Alcala, and he actually went on the Dating Game, which was like, of course, a game show back in the 70s and 80s. And he became known as the Dating Game Killer because he was on that show. And this movie is about the woman who goes on the show and matches with him on the show. And the true story is this woman really did go on the show. She really did match with him, and the idea is after you get matched up, the show sends you on a date. And in real life, the woman who matched with him just decided not to go on a date with him because she thought he was just really weird and creepy. And she had clearly good instincts because he was a serial killer who killed multiple women. And this is a pretty good movie, especially for like a directorial debut. Anna Kendrick does a really good job juggling the tone here because it does have like funny moments in it because Anna Kendrick, I think, is primarily known for comedy, and she's not afraid to shy away from comedic stuff in this movie. But it also is an extremely like dark, disturbing film. They don't really show the murders. They do depict a few of the murders, but they mostly happen in this sort of like abstract off-screen way, which almost makes them like more disturbing because you sort of have to like use your imagination and fill in what they're not showing you. And I was really taken with Daniel Zavato, who plays Rodney Alcala. He is really good in this. He does a really good job of playing this guy who can sort of be charming when he needs to be, but he's also clearly, there's just clearly something wrong with this guy. He does a really good job of playing both like charming, and then when he has to become scary, he does a really good job of being scary. So
Mhm.
yeah, I'm not. It's not like the best film. It does this weird thing where it jumps around in time, which I found kind of distracting. I don't think it works as well as they had hoped it had. But other than that, I thought this was really good for the most part. So yeah, this hits Netflix Friday.
Okay, so that's called Woman of the Hour. And then speaking of murders, Chris, you also saw Terrifier 3. Tell me about that.
I did. So yeah, I like these movies for the most part. The first Terrifier, not very good. Second one, surprisingly good, and this one is sort of like splits the difference. It's okay. I kind of appreciate these movies more than I like them. I appreciate that they have this sort of can do DIY spirit to them. Like these are low budget movies made outside of the studio system. These are these are like the definition of independent films. Uh, it's even been revealed that like after Terrifier 2 became a surprise hit, a lot of studios made offers to like, we'll make Terrifier 3, and Damien Leone, the guy who makes these movies, turned them all down because the offers were kind of low in terms of money. Also, the studios would be like, if you sell us the rights to this, we're going to control the franchise. Basically, we get control of the character. And he very much wanted to keep control of Art the Clown, the character that's become this sort of like pop culture icon. And it's clearly paid off because this is a hit too. This is a big hit. And but like I said, like I appreciate them more than I like them. I like that he's trying really hard to like make these movies outside the studio system. They don't have the best acting. They don't have the best plotting. They're really known for their gore, and the gore, if you're into like horror movie gore, it's very impressive. It's all done practically, with like physical effects rather than CGI, which makes it all the more impressive. Like I grew up, I grew up in I was born in the 80s. I grew up in the late 80s and the 90s, and I came of age in like the sort of tail end of when the horror genre was really all about like creature effects, like practical effects, like guys like Rick Baker and Tom Savini and stuff like that. And these people, like if you were like a horror movie kid like me, those people were like legends. Like these guys who were just sort of like nerdy nerdy guys who made a living creating like severed heads and monsters and stuff like that. And we sort of like lost that now because like so many movies now they use CGI and they like which is like cheaper and easier, but it's not as effective to me, at least to me. I do wonder if like someone born in the 2000s has a different opinion on this. If they like they've grown up more with CGI, it doesn't bother them as much. But I really miss that tactical, like rubber effects sort of thing. And I that's kind of what I like about these movies, that they embrace that like we're doing the gore old school. And
Mhm.
so yeah, like I didn't love this. It goes on a little bit too long. It's like 125 minutes, and which is shorter than the second movie, which is like 140 minutes or something. Like I do like the minute shorter. Um, but I also feel like they're sort of starting to run out of energy. Like I don't know how much longer these can keep going. I do think Damon Leone sort of hinted recently that there'll probably be like one or two more of these movies, and I think that's about right. Like I can't imagine this going to like Terrifier 10 or something like that. It'd be like, all right, enough of this. But it's just been fascinating to watch this sort of become ingrained in the pop culture. Like uh the other like my girlfriend has never seen these movies, but she knows who Art the Clown is because he's like in memes and stuff like that. She actually thought he was just like a meme. She was like, "Oh, there's movies based on that meme." I was like, "No, it's the other way around.
Yeah.
Like the movies came first." And like I have another friend who saw that like there's an Art the Clown animatronic at Spirit Halloween, and I posted a thing the other day when I ranked all the Art the Clown movies, and he was like, "There are movies? I thought that was just like a thing they made up for Spirit Halloween." So it's just like it's fascinating to see how this character has become like this sort of pop culture figure that even if you don't watch the movies, you're sort of like aware of
Yeah, it's so unlikely. I wanted to ask you about the extreme gore in these movies. Like, I know that you don't necessarily get scared of horror movies in the same way that quote unquote normal people do because you immerse yourself so close and so much in that world. Um, are you able to stay in the movie when those gnarly, gory scenes are happening, where Art is like disemboweling or somebody, or does it kind of just the very act of that, does it pull you out of the movie and make you start thinking about how they did it?
Yeah, I think I stay in it most of the time. It's mostly like because they're shot in a certain way that like doesn't take you out of it. But I do like it's not like the most convincing gore. That's sort of what's interesting about it. Like there are times where it's like, oh, that is very clearly like a rubber body being like disemboweled or something like that. But I don't know. I think that's like kind of part of the charm. I do think it does get to be a little bit like numbing after a while. Like watching this one, like near the end, like the last act of the movie is this like endless like torture sequence, and I was like starting to get like, oh my god, like I get it. Like
Mhm.
we can wrap it up. So
Yeah.
it just like depends on how it's handled, really.
Gotcha. Okay. And then you have one more thing you wanted to talk about that you've been watching.
Yeah, so I finally rewatched Longlegs after seeing it in theaters, and we had talked about Longlegs before, and I had sort of mentioned how I wanted to rewatch it because I wasn't as like blown away by it as I wanted to be. And I gotta say, I have this theory, and I posted this on Twitter, and a lot of people actually weighed in on the Twitter thread and sort of like backed me up on this, which makes me feel good about it. But I have this theory that I think this movie is supposed to be funny in a way that I don't think they marketed it as. Like they marketed this as like a straight up like terrifying horror movie,
Hmm.
and I genuinely think Oz Perkins, the writer director, is making something funny here. He's making something like deliberately sort of like comical. Like, and I'm not saying like I'm not like it's so bad it's funny. I genuinely think he has this sort of like dark sense of humor, and he's really leaning into it. Like there's just like so many intentionally funny moments in this movie that I kind of think if you watch it with that mindset of like this is a really dark comedy, it works better. I think it actually makes the movie better, and I kind of feel like that's this theory is being confirmed by the new trailer that just dropped for The Monkey, because that trailer really, to me at least, leans into like absurdity. Like it's cut in this very comical way. And I really do think he's this guy who's sort of like using horror to make funny movies, which, you know, maybe people will hear this theory and be like, "You are full of shit." But I kind of think I'm onto something here.
Okay, so The Monkey, just for people who don't know, is the new movie that Oz Perkins is making that's coming out early next year. It stars Theo James, and yeah, that trailer just came out. It's pretty wild. I kind of enjoyed that trailer. Just 'cause it seems like there's a lot of kind of unexpected wild imagery in there. I wonder if you can give me an example of a scene from Longlegs that you think might be Perkins kind of playing up the humor a little bit that maybe, I don't know, the wider audiences maybe aren't taking as humorously as you are.
I mean, like Nicolas Cage's performance, first of all, it's weird and it's over the top, but it's like it's a funny performance. He, like, that shot where he's at the bus stop and he just has that stupid look on his face is just hilarious to me. There's that part earlier where he goes into the hardware store and he just acts like a freak. And
Yep.
that girl working the counter is just like, that weird guy is back. And also just the way the movie like sort of approaches Mako Monroe's character as this sort of like stiff, awkward weirdo is like, it seems to me like it's really leaning into like a comedic way of approaching this character, where she's just like, she does not know how to act around like normal people. Or, like, there's that scene where she's in Blair Underwood's daughter's bedroom and she's just like sitting on the bed and she's just trying really hard to like make conversation. She has no idea how to act around this kid. And
Yeah.
there's just like multiple moments in the movie like this. That scene where I don't even know if it's like a forensic guy, basically. He's like talking about the doll they found, and he's just like, the other day I thought I heard it whispering my ex-wife's name, but it couldn't be doing that. I just been working too hard. And then they go to see Kiernan Shipka, and everything she says, she's like talking like Gollum for some reason. I genuinely think this stuff is intentionally funny, and I think this is a case of like they did a really good job of marketing this as like a straight up scary movie, but I don't think Oz Perkins sees it that way. And I actually would love to like maybe one day talk to him and just like be like, confirm this to me, Oz Perkins. I should just like reach out to him or something. Just, I won't even tell anyone. Just tell me off the record. I genuinely just want to know.
Okay. Well, people will have the opportunity to see Longlegs in theaters again, because I just got a press release earlier today that the movie is coming back to theaters from October 23rd through Halloween, October 31st. So if you missed it the first time around or just want to see it again on the big screen, you can check it out there. All right, let's take a break and then we'll be right back. All right, Chris, I want to talk about a few things that I've been watching. I watched The Apprentice, directed by Ali Abbasi, which is the Donald Trump biopic starring Sebastian Stan as Trump and Jeremy Strong as Ray Cohn, who's Trump's attorney and mentor. And this movie suggests basically the guy who taught him all of the dirty tricks that he knows today. Mm-hmm. Have you seen The Apprentice yet? Are you interested in this?
I have not. I am interested in seeing this, but it's this weird thing where like, do I really want to sit through a movie about Donald Trump right now or ever? Like maybe like 20 years from now when we are free of him.
Yeah.
But I am curious to see it just because I'm curious about the story. I really like Jeremy Strong. I think he's a phenomenal actor, and I'm curious to see his performance in this. But I have not seen it yet.
Yeah, this would not normally be something that I would be interested in, but I heard that both of those performances, the lead performances, were really very good. So I was just curious enough to seek it out in the off chance that maybe it ends up in the Oscar conversation or something like that. So both of these performances are indeed very good. Jeremy Strong is haunting and basically plays Roy Cohn as if he's like the devil incarnate or something. So he is very... he kind of disappears into the role. So if you're a fan of Jeremy Strong's acting, you're going to like this performance, I think. Sebastian Stan does this thing where he starts out as a somewhat muted version of Trump and then gradually adds more little tics and isms and stuff. So by the end, he's fully recognizable as the Trump of today, even though the movie takes place from the early 70s to the late 80s. I would say despite those two performances, this movie didn't really do anything for me, though. And it kind of comes back to what you just said. Like, do I really want to spend 2 hours in this world, with this character again? And I was kind of hoping this would be like illuminating or revealing or like teach me something that I didn't know. And it's not really that type of movie. It's basically just a character study, but because Trump is so transparent about his desire for power and wealth and always has been that transparent, there's never really anything deeper going on for this movie to tap into. So
Yeah,
I,
it's like I think this is why it's really hard to make art about the Trump era, which we were in and which, terrifyingly enough, we might be in again. Who knows?
mhm,
But Donald Trump is so transparent. Like, there's no secret to Donald Trump. Like, there's no there. Like, everything about him is so like nakedly obvious that you can't really do anything with it. It's just like, this is, we know everything we need to know about Donald Trump at this point. We're never going to learn something new about him.
yeah, and I'm not even a person who's like a politics junkie and who reads, big profiles of political figures and stuff like that. I just kind of have absorbed all of this knowledge about Trump through osmosis, really. Like I have not even really actively sought it out, and like I feel like this movie didn't really tell me anything I didn't know. So I feel like if you have any interest at all, and if you've done even the bare minimum amount of research into Trump's past and history and whatever, like I just don't think this movie is very revelatory. The only thing that I thought was quasi interesting about it is that there's this kind of a Star is Born type of story being told between Trump and Cohn, where their trajectories cross in the middle as Trump is on an upward path to fame in New York and Cohn begins to lose his grip on power. But at the end of the day, that just was not enough for this to really, I don't know, to make it worth watching, in my opinion. But anyway, that's The Apprentice. It's in theaters now. So I do think maybe the day that Trump dies, this movie will have a lot more. It will become a lot more interesting, just because there's so much baggage with, I mean, with him right now, to put it lightly, and the weighing of the future and what could potentially happen less than a month from now is kind of, yeah, terrifying, and like colors the experience of watching it. So
Yeah, can
uh,
he just go away? like
wouldn't
just
that be nice?
go to an island. You have the money. Go to an island. We just please spare us all. Let's all.
Man,
God.
what if that happens today, Chris? What if he just delivers a press conference and he's like, you know what, I'm giving up, I'm going to an island. Like,
God, it would be great. So many people would be happy about that. Like, it would be like a relief. Like just take your money and go. Like, oh my God, go do a TV show again, or just something
yeah,
other than this,
something I can
please.
opt out of.
Yeah, something I can ignore, for the love of God.
Okay, well, I would say a movie that is not worth ignoring is it's called His Three Daughters, which is on Netflix right now. Have you seen this film?
I have actually. I reviewed it for the site. Yeah.
Oh, excellent. Okay, great. So I'll put your review in the show notes. I did not read your review. I skipped this one for some reason. Just didn't even realize that you covered it. So this is written and directed by Azazel Jacobs, and it stars Carrie Coon, Elizabeth Olsen, and Natasha Lyonne. They play three estranged sisters who visit their father's New York City apartment because their dad is dying, and he could go at any moment. And this movie does a really good job of exploring something that I haven't really seen very much of on screen, which is that horrible feeling of waiting around for something inevitable and sad to happen, and how that forms basically like a pressure cooker where all of these old resentments and dynamics and personality clashes can bubble to the surface. So I thought all three of the actresses here are excellent, playing very, very different types of people. And I thought some of this movie was actually pretty unpleasant to watch because of that, because the characters are kind of sniping at each other for most of the runtime because they disagree and live their lives in such different ways. But there's a moment at the end that I won't say anything about, but I just think that moment and the cumulative effect of these performances makes the whole thing worth watching. So I ultimately enjoyed His Three Daughters, even though when it first started and these characters are launching into these long monologues and stuff, I was like, oh man, I don't know if I'm going to be able to really like get on this movie's wavelength. But especially, it's one of those films that like I have thought about a lot since I finished watching it, and it grows in my estimation every day. So um, I guess real quick before I ask you about your thoughts about this, Chris. It's so nice to see Elizabeth Olsen in a non-Marvel project. I know that WandaVision gave her a lot to do, but I forgot how good she could be outside of those parameters. So, what did you think of His Three Daughters?
Yeah, I really enjoyed this. It's I said this in my review, but sometimes it's just great to watch really good actors do their job, and that's sort of what this movie is. It's three really good performers, very different performers. Like they all have different acting styles, and just watching them work is just like sort of like a treat. I also thought this movie did a really great job with perspective, the way it shows the three sisters different perspectives, because it does this interesting thing where it starts off sort of like with Carrie Coon's character suggesting that Natasha Lyonne's character is this sort of like slacker stoner who does nothing, and then you slowly start to realize that like, oh, she has such like she's been living here this entire time, and she's been taking care of him while they haven't been living here, and it just makes you like go back and sort of like reappraise what you thought you knew about the character. And
Hmm.
I just thought that was like really smart writing. I also thought it was very interesting the way they deliberately avoided until like the ending. That's not really a spoiler because his name's in the credits, but I thought it was interesting the way they go out of their way to not show the father. I thought that
Hmm.
like that the way they filmed like the father who is dying, he's dying in his bedroom, and the camera deliberately never goes in that room. It always hangs back in the hallway. And I thought they were actually going to keep that up through the whole movie. And I was like, oh, this is interesting. And then when they finally show him, it pays off into this really incredible scene that sort of like ties the whole movie together. So yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So I was really impressed with this. This is one of those movies that like it got dumped on Netflix, and man, what a bummer, because I don't think anyone even knows it's like streaming right now. I hope people find it.
Yeah, it's called His Three Daughters, streaming on Netflix right now. Another Netflix movie I caught up with is called Will and Harper. Have you seen this one?
I have not seen this yet. I want to watch it. I just have not yet.
Okay, so Josh Greenbaum, who's the director of Barb and Star Go to Vista Del Mar, among other things, directed this, and it's a really lovely documentary. The premise is that Will Ferrell gets an email from a longtime friend who he met working at Saturday Night Live back in the day, and the friend explains that she has transitioned from a man to a woman, and her name is now Harper Steele. And Harper used to go on these long road trips all across the country and stop in at little dive bars and drink terrible beer and eat at greasy diners and all this kind of stuff like that. But since she transitioned, she's felt like the country might be too hostile for her to do that anymore, presenting as a woman. So Will Ferrell goes on this road trip with her, sort of to act as a buffer because everybody loves Will Ferrell, but also to ask Harper all the questions that he's curious about regarding her transition. And while there are a couple of pretty harrowing and kind of dicey moments along the way, there's a lot of joy here and some really great bits and really funny scenes in it. There's this moment where Will Ferrell dresses up in a disguise in Las Vegas that I thought was just hilarious. But yeah, it's really, really good stuff. It's called Will and Harper. It's a beautiful movie about friendship and in an era where like politicians are attacking trans people just to rile up their bases, and there's anti-trans TV commercials blanketing the nation right now and all this nonsense. I think it's kind of an important movie that puts a human face on this and could hopefully help people understand that there's nothing wrong. There's nothing here worth demonizing. You know, we're all just like trying to get by, basically. So the movie's called Will and Harper. It's on Netflix right now. Just a really, really beautiful movie and some really funny stuff. And Kristen Wiig has a small role in it, and her appearance builds to something that really moved me by the end of the movie. So good stuff. I highly recommend checking this out. Chris, I hope you get a chance to watch it.
Yeah, I definitely will watch this at some point.
Okay, I also watched Deep Red, which is a movie from Dario Argento, the master Italian horror director. I assume you've seen this one, right, Chris?
Yes, I have. Yeah.
Okay, so the Criterion Channel referred to this as the ultimate giallo movie, and I've talked to you a little bit before about that subgenre. And I watched Tenebrae, which is the Argento movie. We talked about that not too long ago. This one is about a musician who is hanging out with his drunk pal in the middle of an Italian square, and the friend wanders away, and the musician looks up into the window of a nearby apartment and witnesses this woman getting murdered. And he starts to investigate this crime, and more people around him start getting killed. And the movie is all about him trying to figure out who did this. And a band called Goblin did the score, which I think I've only heard them in context of like doing horror movie scores before. I've certainly never like sat down and listened to a Goblin album or anything. But I love the score, even though it doesn't always strike me as being fully appropriate to the scene at hand, but it's very synth heavy and really cool. So I really dug that. The whole movie features this really awful ADR, which is as bad as any spaghetti western I've ever seen in terms of the people's voices just not matching up with their lips. But you kind of get used to that after a little while, so it didn't really detract from my experience too much. I've not seen Argento's whole filmography, but of the big ones that I've seen so far, I think I personally prefer Tenebrae and Suspiria over this one. But what do you make of Deep Red, Chris? What are your memories of watching that?
Yeah, I dug this. It's I haven't seen it in a while, but I just remember the coloring. Like what I love about these movies is the aesthetic. Really, it's like you sort of watch these movies for the vibes, sort of
Mm-hmm.
more than like the story. And I don't know. I just that's sort of what I love about them.
Yeah, really heightened colors. The blood is like so red
It's
that
like paint, basically.
yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
yeah.
What's your relationship to Goblin? Do you know them from anything outside of movie scores, or what's the deal
No,
there?
yeah. I only know them from these movies, so like it's almost like funny to think that like they have a career outside, like in my mind, like that's obviously not true, so it's like it's just interesting that like they have this whole sort of career with outside of this. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So last thing I wanted to talk about is in the what we've been playing section, and it was my birthday recently, and my parents got me a copy of Star Wars Outlaws for the PS5. So I've been playing that a little bit. It's this open world game set between the events of The Empire Strikes Back and Return of the Jedi, where you play as a thief named Kay Vess, who is trying to get off of her home planet and make a name for herself. And I've only been playing for a few hours so far, but it seems like the main dynamic of this game is that you pull various heists and jobs, which are always really fun, and your actions ripple out into different crime syndicates. So if you steal something from some random guy, maybe the Hutts, who are run by our old pal Jabba the Hutt, are not thrilled with you because that person was their ally. So now you're in the doghouse with the Hutts, basically. Or if you like cross the wrong person, maybe you'll run afoul of Crimson Dawn, the crime syndicate run by Emilia Clarke's character in the movie Solo, a Star Wars story. So it kind of becomes dangerous for you to be in territory that Crimson Dawn controls. So there's this balance that you're trying to do where you have to pull as many jobs as you can while navigating different planets and these relationships with these criminal groups and trying to stay alive. So it's very fun. Shout out to the team at Massive Entertainment and Ubisoft who put this together. It's called Star Wars Outlaws, and I think it just came out like a couple months ago, and I'm slowly getting into that. So
I have a question though. It's a
yes.
really how woke is this game? No, I'm kidding. That's
Well,
all I
yes.
care about when there's a Star Wars title. I want to know how woke it is.
Star Wars title with a female protagonist. God forbid.
Oh, forget it. No, thank you. Boys only.
Oh man. All right. Well, yeah, I think that's going to do it for today's episode of the show. You can find more about a lot of the stuff that we talked about on today's show at slashfilm.com, linked inside the show notes for this episode. Let's see. Slash Film Daily is published every weekday, bringing you the most exciting news from the world of movies and TV, as well as deeper dives into the great features you can find on the site. You can subscribe to the show on Apple, Overcast, Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts. Send your feedback, questions, comments, concerns, and mailbag topics to us at bpearson@slashfilm.com. Make sure to leave your name and general geographic location in case we mention your email on the air. Don't forget to take a minute to rate and review the show on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. That really helps us out a lot. Tell your friends about the show any way you can.